Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. I'm Alberto Mendez, co-founder and CEO at PlexiGrid, a company that we started to reinvent the electricity grids for the energy transition. So, yeah, I always say no such thing as an energy transition without a grid transition. The grid was engineered 100 years ago or more for a very different energy system with large, centralized, controllable power plants, with very predictable power flows from the large power plants to the cities to the households. You think about energy transition, it's one by one exactly the opposite. We have millions going into hundreds of millions of distributed, intermittent, bidirectional, virtual power plants, and simply, you know, as the energy transition is unfolding, the grid has become the single largest bottleneck of the energy transition. Grid bottlenecks are the #1 cause of delays and cancellations of renewable energy projects and electrification projects. In all countries with advanced energy transitions, we see that grid fees become the largest component on electricity bill for consumers. Like I live in Sweden, 60% of my pre-tax electricity bill is grid. Norway, 70%. In Germany, grid fees are already the largest component on the bill for domestic consumers. And, you know, if you think about energy transition, it pushes energy prices down because of cheap renewables, putting pressure on energy markets, but it brings grid fees through the roof because you need to build out the grid. So, yeah, the good news is that there is a lot more we can do to resolve these bottlenecks in a much faster and cheaper way. I define, if you look at transmission, you know, they are a flex network. They have real-time control and visibility, and it operates very efficiently. Well, efficiently in transmission means 30 to 40% average utilization of capacity through the year. When you go to mid-voltage, that drops to 20, 30%, and when you go to low voltage, you have less than 10% average utilization of capacity. If you cannot control things, if you cannot see what happens on real time, and if you have a security of supply mandate that the grid has to hold in Bilbao or in Madrid or in Paris on a cold day, there is only one way to do it, which is overbuild the whole grid in low voltage for a peak that maybe happens 50 hours a year. And the rest of the year you are floating in overcapacity. It's effective, but it's not efficient. And now we want to electrify everything with a distribution system that operates at this efficiency level. No wonder grid costs are going through the roof, you know? I call this the onion. You know, I see the value chain as an onion. In the end of the onion, you have the end consumers, like you guys, industrial or domestic. At the core of the onion, you have the core grid systems. These are very robust systems, like the banking systems, you know. Some of them are from the 70s, 80s, very robust. And then what we see is that you start to see layers of a stack and new players coming in. It's like, if you think about fintech, this will be your PayPal or, you know, Revolut and so on. But in the end of the day, for PayPal to add value, it has to be connected back to the core banking systems, because in the end of the day, you need to move money from one bank account to the other one. So if you look, way back in the electricity world, all these connections has been done for transmission or high voltage. So if you think about all the battery operators, all the flex retailers like Tiber or Octopus, everybody sitting on a flexible asset, they are monetizing against spot markets or ancillary service markets, right? The flex markets from the DSOs. But if you go to distribution, many of these links are missing. And the biggest missing link is the ability of the DSOs to operate like DSOs, to have real-time control and real-time orchestration flexibly of millions or tens of millions of nodes and virtual power plants or real-time. It's immensely more complex than in transmission. In transmission, you have hundreds or thousands of nodes. The big power plants, the big substations, and the high voltage lines that connects everything. But if we replicate this in low voltage, which is immensely complex, then we will see a convergence in efficiency from these sub 10% levels to the levels you see on the grids that are already working flex. It's also transformational for everybody else on the value chain, because all of a sudden, all these players will have a complete new revenue stream untapped that they can monetize in these markets, whether you are a battery operator or Octopus or Tiber. I call this the flexibility iceberg. 99% of the flex players are monetizing against spot markets or ancillary services markets. But below the water, untapped, you have a 200 billion euro optimization problem that can be solved. And in this onion, you know, my last message, all these people are ready to engage. They have fantastic modern stacks. It just takes, you know, the demand side to equip them with the technology they are going to need to engage. This, by the way, is the largest change in network control technology, and it will come together with the largest re-regulation of electricity networks in decades. Some people say it will be the largest change in 100 years in distribution networks. It's like the change we saw in telecom, moving from analog copper fixed telephony lines to GSM, the first generation of digital telephony that was invented by a European company, let's not forget, called Ericsson. And then became 2G, that is now 5G, and the rest is history. We're going to need, and we are seeing already a change of that magnitude in distribution. Here is a PlexiGrid identifying on real time the networks, the bottlenecks in a network in low voltage. What you see there is streets in the network of one of our customers. We can see once we activate flexibility, we can wipe out most of the upgrades. Well, there is a stubborn bottleneck here on the center that won't go away, but as you could see, 70, 80% of the bottlenecks we could distribute. Then the regulation part, we are operating in 11 markets with different flex, I call them religions, right? So the physics are the same. You need to resolve this red bottleneck somehow. But in Australia and New Zealand, for example, they use dynamic operating envelopes, so they use our digital twin to create these envelopes, maximum injection and maximum consumption, feeder per feeder, substation per substation. In Sweden with Vattenfall, we are translating these colors to price signals on the grid, so street by street. So this street that is congested has a different price for the grid at this moment than the next street, and it works really well. And last but not, Germany, for example, has Energy Wende 14A, which is a flex tariff. If you put up your heat pump or your EV on a flex grid tariff, you get a discount on the grid fees on your bill. And last but not least, the main religion that we see unfolding is through local flexibility markets, in which, you know, we use our real-time digital twin to create automatic activation and purchasing of flexibility on the Piccolo platform or Nodes platform. We have automatic integration on both. And where the rest of the ecosystem, the aggregators, battery operators, and so on, they are on the other side monetizing that flexibility. And yeah, this is PlexiGrid in action. This is in New Zealand with local flex tariff, orchestrating, rescheduling EVs so that the load is always within the limits. And that saved a lot of upgrades and accelerated a lot of connections that were on the queue. And we can control that the load in the substation never exceeds the maximum. Here is in Sweden, island of Gotland. That's the Swedish Mallorca, a very congested part of the Vattenfall network, where we are using PlexiGrid to create dynamic pricing. And the last one is through local flexibility markets. We're going to go to one of the substations here. And what we see is that now we are fine in the morning, but towards the evening we are going to see an overload. And, but we have enough flexibility to solve it. So PlexiGrid, you know, finds automatically the activation of flexibility locally in the market that is needed to resolve the congestion at minimum cost. And yeah, the last 10 seconds of my presentation. Here you have PlexiGrid automatically creating the transaction, exactly which flex consumers have to be rescheduled to resolve the congestion at minimum cost. So yeah, largest change in network technology in decades, largest re-regulation of electricity grids in decades. And there are many religions. We have some favorite, but we are agnostic. At the end of the day, we are integrating with flex grid tariffs, through flex markets, through flexible network connections, dynamic operating envelopes. At the end, the physical problem is only one, right? And what we see is that all religions solve the problem reasonably efficiently. Thank you very much.